And this one looks like a really fun and well-designed card combat game. We're going to be fighting against the other players as well as 3 different monsters throughout the entirety of the game. Something that I really like about this game is that there's a ton of variability because there's a bunch of different heroes that you can play as, and then you're also going to be taking their associated deck. But then at the start of the game, players are going to be randomly dealt 10 cards that are going to be added as different cards that you can acquire throughout the game. This means that even if you choose the same character over again in a following game, there's still going to be a ton of new options and cards and strategies to choose from. On top of that, there's a bunch of different monsters offered in the box, but like I said, you're only going to be including 3 in a given game, which means that the different combinations of monsters that you'll see is going to vary every single game as well. Another thing I really like is that this is a game that plays over a series of rounds, and each round you're going to have a different player acting as the leader. What's really cool about this is that when you're the leader, you get a few different benefits, but one of those benefits is to draw different attack cards from the monster deck and then distribute those amongst the players however you see fit. That's a really nice perk already, but as an added benefit, you also are going to be putting those cards face down, so only you know what each of the cards are hiding. This game also has a few more unique aspects to it with the way that the currencies work in this game, as well as the way that the cards are played based on their initiative values. And I'll get into all of that in just a second here because the publisher was kind enough to send me a prototype copy of the game, so I do want to thank them for that. And I have it all set up here for 3 players, and they did give me a playmat, but this is a completely optional buy. It does come with its own playmat included in the game, which is just a little bit more of a condensed version of the playmat, which might be a better option for you if you are limited on table space, but if you want to have that full experience and the really nice neoprene touch, then the playmat is a good option as well. I do have this set up as a 3-player game, but because I do have limited space to fit all this on the camera here, I just have myself set up using the player mat, and then I just have the 2 other players set up over on the right here. Your starting hero card goes into this slot in the bottom left, and like I said, there's a bunch of different heroes to choose from, and they all have some different effects and stats, and a summary of how your hero operates is provided in the bottom of the card. The 3 different stats in the top right hand corner of your card are primarily used to meet different requirements for different cards that you're going to be acquiring throughout the game, and then the number in the green in the middle right hand side of your card is your character's health. The starting deck that goes with your hero is over on the right here. And these will have your factions icon in the top right corner, but they'll also have different initiative values, which I'll come back to later, as well as all sorts of different effects. All these cards are available to use at the beginning of the game, but you will be adding more cards to the deck throughout the game, and that's where this other deck comes into play over here. And the way that this was set up is that these are just 10 cards that were randomly drawn to each of the players at the beginning of the game, and these are just a subset of cards from a massive deck of cards which I have in the box here, and this random draw of cards is just the recommended way to do it for your first few games. But if you do want to get into more advanced setup, there is options for that as well. In the top right corner of these cards, there's different requirements that you have to meet first before you're able to actually use that card. The way that you meet those requirements is by increasing the stats on your hero card, and the way that you do that is by buying item cards throughout the game, which will get connected to your hero card, adding those stats together. The game offers 2 different types of currencies. There's your experience points and your gold, and the experience points are useful for getting more of these cards into your draw deck. The gold, of course, is useful for buying more item cards, which will be in a shared display, and each of these items will have their own amount of gold displayed on them, and of course that's going to be the cost of that card. The nice thing about gaining an item card or one of these skill cards is that anytime that you do that, you're also going to be gaining a Shadow Stone. These Shadow Stones are the key to winning the game, and the end game is going to be triggered anytime that a player has 9 of these, or when that 3rd boss is defeated. There are some other ways to gain Shadow Stones, such as completing your private objective, and each player is going to be drawing 2 of these at the start of the game and choosing one that they want to commit to, and if you are able to complete it, it's going to be revealed at the end of the game, granting you a Shadow Stone if you were able to complete it. Being the player to take out one of the monsters will also gain you the rewards that that monster has to offer, and as I mentioned, there are 3 different monsters that you're going to be playing with throughout a game, and each of these monsters are going to be increasing in their difficulty, but also increasing in their rewards. There's only ever 1 monster revealed at a time, so this is the one that we're going to be starting with, and you can see it has a very simple reward of just 1 gold, has 5 health, and also has its unique set of attacks here that are going to be correlating to different monster attack cards that are going to be drawn throughout the game. If we compare this one to the second monster, you can see that the rewards get a little bit better with this one granting you a card, but of course it is more difficult to defeat, and then that only gets even more difficult with the final monster. And this one does gain you a Shadowstone directly. Each of the different hero decks will also have 1 or 2 of these cards that have a star on them. What that means is that card is just always in play, and it's going to be granting you whatever special ability is outlined on that card. For my character, anytime that I defeat a monster, I get to recover 1 health while all opponents lose 1 health. As I mentioned before, your different action cards that you're going to be acquiring throughout the game all have different initiative values, but the initiative of 0 is a special one because if you ever get a card that's initiative 0, that's just going to be immediately going into your field here, and each player does start with 1 of those that can be used to help defend you against various attacks. The way this specific card works is that if you ever take full damage from an attack, you can then flip it to its dodge side, which will allow you to block 5 damage the next time that you are targeted for another attack. The dodge also grants you a health if it's still visible at the end of the round, but whether you're using it to get health or to reduce the damage of an attack, it is going to be flipping back to its original side. The last card I want to show you before we get into a round here is just this leader card, and this is just a card that keeps track of which player is currently the starting player. And this card outlines all the different privileges that you get as that starting player because you get to make the decision at the start of each round whether or not all players get an extra experience point or if all players get an extra gold. This is skipped for the first round, but all players do start with 1 experience point and 1 gold. What's also nice about this card is that it does also have this shield icon on the left here, and any shield icons that are visible in your display, you can actually cover up with 1 of your damage tokens in order to reduce the amount of damage you receive at any given time by that amount. I should also mention that some of these cards do also have this nice holographic finish. Before the first round starts, players do also draft a starting item card, and these are indicated by their green back, but you're only going to be putting out 1 more than the number of players, and since I have this set up for 3 players, we'll put 4 of these out on display. For myself, I'll draft this one that allows me to heal 2 health during the combat phase. The other player will draft this one that allows them to nullify any spells that are cast on them. And the final player will take this card, which allows them to spend it as a gold, but only when they buy a restricted item, and I'll explain what that is in a second. But when they do that, they do also have to lose 1 health. This one just gets discarded back into the box, but I guess I'll just go ahead and explain what the restricted items are. These are just very powerful item cards that have the word restricted at the bottom of the card, and when you do acquire these, you're only ever allowed to have 1 at a single time, and it's always going to be your topmost card. And the reason for that is just so that this card's always visible, so you always know that you already have a restricted card. It doesn't mean you're not able to buy another restricted card, but if you do that, you have to discard the one that you currently have. But I think we can walk through around here, and what's really nice about this game is that everything is clearly outlined on this player aid here, so we just go ahead and go through the list. And the first phase is the team up phase, and this is the phase where the leader is going to be choosing one of those 2 actions, whether all the players gain an experience point or whether they all gain a gold. Like I said, the first round, this is skipped, so we're not going to do that in this first round. But then the lead player is also going to be drawing 3 of these monster cards, looking at them in secret, and then assigning 1 to each of the other players and themselves, keeping the cards face down. These cards have different icons on them that all correlate to the different actions on the current monster's card. The strategy here, of course, is to just give yourself the card that you think is the least debilitating based on the current game state. The one that is the most damaging you'll probably want to give to the player that's currently the most ahead, but whatever you decide, you're going to be distributing 1 of those cards to each of the other players. In the next phase, all the players can look at their current deck, and then you can choose any 3 cards that you want to use for this round. Your hand limit is dictated by how many monsters have been defeated in the game, so every time a monster is defeated, your hand limit's going to be increased by 1, so after this first monster is defeated, I'll then be able to choose 4 cards to keep in my hand. And I've chosen my 3 cards here, so the remaining cards just go back to the draw deck, and the other players have chosen their cards as well. And the way that this round plays out is that we're going to be going sequentially through the numbers 1 to 6, and these numbers correlate to the initiative values on the cards. This means that first the players are going to be resolving their number 1 initiative cards in order, then their number 2 initiative cards in order, then their number 3 initiative cards in order as well. But the third phase is a special one because if a player still has a face down monster card, then that's also going to be resolved at that time. Then this just continues until that 6th time, and if you don't have a card for a specific initiative value that's currently being resolved, then you just don't play anything at that time. So we'll be resolving the number 1 initiative value cards first, and as I showed you before, I actually don't have any, so I won't be doing anything right now, but the next player in order does have a number 1 card, so they're going to go ahead and play that. And this allows them to either damage all heroes, creatures, and monsters by 1 health, or to heal all heroes and creatures by 1 health. At this point in the game, I think they're just going to damage everyone, and to indicate this, you're just going to be putting a damage marker on my hero to indicate that damage, a marker on the monster here, a damage on the other player, and then a damage on themselves because it does say to damage all heroes. But the player who used this card also has this item card, which allows them to ignore any spell that is cast on their hero. So because they have that card, I think you actually wouldn't damage them, but you would damage everyone else, so that's a really nice card to have for them. Something that's not so nice about this card is that every time you use it, it does get stunned, so you're going to have to put 2 stun tokens on it, but you will get to remove 1 stun token at the end of each round. For every card that you play that damages the monster, you do also have to reveal a monster attack card, and the first one that you're going to be revealing is the one that was drawn to you, so because this player did just damage the monster with the card, they're going to be revealing and resolving this card earlier than everyone else. The card I gave him corresponds with the block action, which means that this damage didn't actually go through, so this player only damaged me and the other player, which is still a pretty good turn. And now the last player gets to play any of their initiative 1 cards if they did add any to their hand, which they did, and this card allows them to reduce any target's health by 1. And I think they're going to go ahead and return the favor by attacking Roland here, so he's going to get 1 damage. One thing to note is that this is a spell, so his card could have been used to negate this effect, but this is also one-time use, so he no longer actually has this card. Now that we've resolved all the initiative 1 value cards, we're going to be going through the same sequence, resolving all the initiative 2 level cards, starting with me because I am still a lead player, but I do have 2 of these cards in my hand, and whenever you have multiple cards of the same initiative value, you're going to be choosing one to play first, and it doesn't really matter in my case, so I'll just go ahead and play this one, but then you'll be putting the second one face down, and then you can choose to use it if you want to, or depending on how this one resolves, you might choose not to use the second card, and if that's the case, you can just put it back into your draw pile. But this card allows me to deal 1 damage to a target, and if the target loses health by the attack, I then gain 1 XP. And I will also go ahead and damage Roland, and he has no way to defend against this right now, which means I do also gain that experience point. And I think I will go ahead and play my next card here, which allows me to deal damage again to any target, but this time I'm going to be dealing the amount of damage equal to my damage stat. This card also gains me an experience point, but specifically if a response action is not used to defend against it. This means that I could freely attack the monster because I know my monster card is a spell card and not a response card, or I could go ahead and attack Roland again because he didn't block my previous attack with a response card, probably means that he doesn't have one in his hand. Or I could attack Eris because she also was damaged by Roland and she didn't use a response card then. But also we've only been dealing out single points of damage until now, so it's possible that any one of these players could be hanging onto a response card just in case someone or the monster attacks them with a more powerful attack. Because I don't know what exactly they might have, I think I'm going to go ahead and attack the monster in this case. My strength stat is a 3, which means that I do dish out 3 points of damage, but then just like before, anytime that you attack a monster with a card, you do have to reveal a monster attack card, and I gave myself the spell card, which unfortunately allows the monster to heal 1 point of damage inflicted by me, so one of these tokens will be removed, but I still did inflict 2 damage, and this monster only has 5 health, so I do have a nice lead here. And one thing I really like about about this game is that all damage accumulated on a monster is color-coded to the player, and it's only defeated if a player has reached that threshold individually. This means that if I had 4 points of damage on it, and then if Roland inflicted 1 point of damage, he would not kill the monster in this case, because even though there's 5 tokens here, you need 5 tokens of your own color in order to defeat the monster, which I do think was a really smart way to implement this mechanism. But since the monster did a spell action and not a response action, I'd get another experience point here. Now Roland's going to go ahead and play any level 2 initiative cards if he has any, and this one allows him to deal 2 damage to a target, and if the target doesn't use a response, also gain an experience point. And because he doesn't want to fall too behind on attacking the monster here, I think he is going to go ahead and do that. So deal 2 damage to the monster, and because he did already reveal his previous monster attack card, this means he's going to have to draw a new one and resolve it randomly. And in this case, he drew the spell, which was the same one that I had. So it's only going to reduce his damage by 1, which isn't too bad, and it wasn't a response, so he does also get an experience point. Eris would then go ahead and play any of her level 2 initiative cards, which she does also have, and this one allows her to deal damage to the target equal to her spell stat. I think she is also going to go ahead and attack the monster here for 2 reasons. The first one being that her spell stat is a level 3, meaning that she could potentially do 3 damage. But then she does also have a response card that she's been hanging on to because she was planning to attack the monster, and he can do quite a lot more damage than what any of the players have inflicted so far. Then she's going to reveal her monster attack card, which is an attack which would deal 2 damage to her normally. But she's going to use this response card, which does allow her to block 2 damage, and because she's using this card as a response, she also gains 1 gold. Response cards have these little lightning bolt icons, which means that they can be played at any time. So let's grab that gold, and she will not be taking any damage. Now we go ahead and resolve any of the level 3 initiative cards, and I don't have any, so I'm not going to be playing anything. And the only other player with cards still is Roland, and he also does not have a level 3 card, so that phase is just skipped, except for the fact that it's at this point where you'd be revealing your monster card if you haven't revealed it already. Then we just go ahead and resolve any level 4 initiative cards that players might still have, and I do have one in my hand, which just allows me to gain 1 gold, and then I can also replace up to 2 items in the market, which I don't think I'm going to do. And then Roland played the same card as me, so he's also going to gain 1 gold. And since all players' cards have now been played, we're going to be moving into the build-up phase where we can actually spend our gold to buy items or spend our experience points to buy new cards from our separate deck here. And I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through each player, but I'll just go ahead and show you what I'm going to do. And I want to go ahead and buy this Shield Strike card from my deck here. And this one requires me to have 8 health, which I already do, but then it also requires me to have 2 of those gear icons. To buy this, I'm going to have to discard 3 of my experience points, but this is going to be going into my hand now, and I can choose it freely in the next round if I want to, except for the fact that I still don't have enough gear icons. I just need 1 more, and there is a card out on the display that does have a gear icon that I could use, but unfortunately it costs 3 and I only have 2 gold right now. But because I did just purchase a card, I do gain a Shadow Stone, and I already had this one here because I forgot to move it when I was doing examples earlier, so we'll just go ahead and leave that there. All the other players would get a chance to buy cards as well, but then we'd be moving into the cleanup phase. All markers covering up any shield icons would then be removed, and one thing to note here is that I did have one of those in play because I did have the leader card, so when I was attacked earlier, rather than taking that damage, I could have instead put a marker over that shield to negate that damage, and that would have never happened. But I didn't think of it at the time, so no takes backsies this time. Players also get all their cards back that aren't currently stunned, and the ones that are going to have 1 token removed, meaning that this one will return to Eris in the following round's cleanup phase. The leader card then gets passed to the next player, which would be Roland, and then he's going to be starting the next round. I think playing that one round does give a good enough idea of how this game plays, but I do want to show you a couple other cards that I didn't have a chance to show off. And the first one is the predict cards, and these ones allow you to choose any other player at the table and then predict whether or not they have a certain valued initiative card in their hand. If you guess correctly, you're going to be getting the reward on that card, which could be a benefit to you or some sort of penalty for the other player. There's also the creature cards that players can gain, which do have a health of their own, and they usually have some sort of effect when you play them into your board, but then they also stay there and can give you an ongoing effect as long as they're still alive. This is just another example of that, but I did want to point this one out because I just wanted to show that you can get even more Initiative 0 cards. And what's nice about these is that they just instantly go into your station field as soon as you get them. You don't have to waste one of your cards in your hand in order to get that into play. And the rounds just continue like I explained until one of those endgame conditions are triggered. And then at that point, players are going to be adding up any additional shadow stones that they have. Then it's the player with the most that wins the game. And that's pretty much everything you need to play the game, and I think they did do a really solid job here creating a unique card fighting game that isn't like any other. If this one did look interesting to you, definitely check it out, and I will have a link to the campaign in the description down below.